We've got the Justice Secretary Alex Chalk live from conference this morning. Thanks for your time, Secretary, and good to see you. You want to increase the use of whole life orders, extending them to what?
Right, so this is to ensure that for those most serious offenders, life really should mean life. So that means that when a murder is committed and there is sexual or sadistic conduct in respect of that victim, that the judges will impose a whole life order. So that life should mean life, unless, of course, there are exceptional circumstances, but that will be the default result.
And you're going to be looking at this retrospectively, so there'll be a number of people who've already been sent to jail who potentially could see their sentences being significantly increased.
Well, so we should be clear, it's those who've been convicted but are yet to be sentenced, so there can be an element of retrospectivity to that extent. So that's important. And as I say, the point is that we want to ensure that there is confidence and certainty in sentencing, so that the public can know for these most appalling crimes, these most heinous offenders, that they do in fact get the punishment that keeps the British people safe and also meets the justice of the case.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say you'll find few people who will object to that.
But the question is, Secretary of State, why isn't that happening already?
Well, look, it does happen in respect of a number of particularly appalling murders, and there are people who are serving whole life orders. So you'll know, for example, Wayne Couzens is an example, but there are plenty of others as well. But what we want to do is to ensure that where that is the starting point, in other words, where that is the option that judges should be thinking about as an initial proposition, it now becomes the default. So it's what should happen, unless, of course, the judge decides there are exceptional circumstances. And we think that puts the law in the right place, that meets the instincts of the British people, and as I say, does justice and provides, you know, a crumb of comfort for families after the most appalling crimes, that they feel justice is truly being served.
You'll be announcing that formally in your speech a little bit later on, and there'll also be a big speech today from the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, front of the Telegraph this morning, talking about an interview that he's done today, that transgender women will be banned from female wards. Lots of people, again, may say that's a lot of common sense, but surely pretty trivial issue, and trying to create a distraction away from the fact, here we are, day 2 of significant strikes in the NHS between junior doctors and consultants. And let's be honest, a conference that's completely overshadowed by what we expect to be the abolition of HS2 tomorrow.
Well, look, first of all, I don't think it's a trivial issue. I think it's important. I think patients want to know how the circumstances in which they're being treated. And I should say that in prisons, which I'm responsible for, we're very clear that those who are biological men with birth genitalia, or indeed who've been convicted of a serious offence of sex or violence, should not serve in the women's estate. And I think it's important. People need to understand, and people want reassurance that we are standing up for the rights of women.
And
I think
but the numbers of people affected
point.
by that are absolutely tiny when you compare it with 1 million appointments being cancelled in the NHS and the billions of pounds that have been spent on HS2 already. It's a distraction. It's culture wars. It's just trying to say, oh, look over here. It's that good old-fashioned dead cat in the room.
No, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. And by the way, it will not, of course, be the only thing that that the Health Secretary talks about. But I do think there are issues. People want to understand that we are clear-eyed and we're sensible and we're making common-sense decisions on these points. Now, as to the wider issues about strikes, our position there is very clear, that there is an offer on the table, which, incidentally, is the offer that has been proposed by the independent pay review body. So that's where you have individuals of total independence, of professionalism, of integrity, who make that recommendation. And in my area of prisons and probation, that is exactly the same approach that was taken. We listened to what the pay review body said, and we accepted every last penny of the recommendation. And I do think that's important to be clear about. We accepted it, and that's precisely what we've awarded in the prison sector.
You could ask, looking at the whole life orders, what would the point of parole be? And I'm thinking of John Venables, who's coming up for a parole hearing soon, one of the boys, now a man, who murdered Jamie Bulger. And you could look and you could say, everything you're talking about is geared towards a case like that life should mean life. So where does that leave parole? Will people ever get a fair crack of the whip with parole?
No, so the whole point about whole life orders is there is no option for that. So what it effectively means is that individual must die in prison. So the point about parole is there are certain cases where if that individual can persuade the parole board that they are no longer a danger to the public, then they should be able to get out, albeit on life license, so that if they commit an offence, they're straight back inside. But there is a certain number of cases, we think, it's where there is sexual or sadistic conduct as part of the murder, and you can think, of course, about the appalling Sarah Everard case and others, where life should mean life, and they shouldn't have the prospect of parole, because that is it is only by doing that that you truly do justice to the horror of that particular case.
I'm almost reticent to ask you more further on HS2, just because I've seen a number of ministers over, let's be honest, more than a week now, really squirming and trying to avoid the question. We all know it's going to be axed, this northern leg, right? And I just want to hear an honest answer from a senior politician involved in this. Are you embarrassed? Is HS2 an emblem of shame for you?
No, absolutely not. And I tell you this, although this, of course, this is a decision for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, I sit opposite the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in the Cabinet room where we look at things like the Illegal Migration Act. So that's how you give effect to the Rwanda legislation. And I see in someone who's the best briefed person in the room, who goes through the detail calmly,
I didn't ask you about the Prime Minister's credentials. I asked you whether you were embarrassed and ashamed about HS2 being cancelled.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally. And I think that is the right approach. I think that's the only way that you do justice by the people of this country, the taxpayers of this country, to follow the evidence, and that's what he does.
OK, Alex Chalk, Secretary of State for Justice and the Lord Chancellor, thanks very much for your time this morning. Good luck with your speech this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.